In the Lab, a Texans podcast that takes a different look at things. Drew Dougherty and John Harris have their lab coats and goggles on, and the Bunsen burners burning. Here's Drew.
Hello there, friends. This is In the Lab. I am Drew Dougherty. That handsome dude waving is John Harris. And Johnny, I've said this many, many times, but this might be the most in the labbiest in the lab we're about to do. Sometimes we get pretty nerdy. We go off on these rabbit holes. Well, this rabbit hole is deep. This rabbit hole is long. This rabbit hole is fun. You know why? Because I'm surprising you. I'm really surprising you today with this. You don't know about this.
Yeah, I have no idea. As you were introducing it, I was like racking my brain for, wow, did Drew send me an email that I missed that I was supposed to read? Did I miss it? I definitely missed something.
Now, you've got a lot on your plate.
I haven't. Okay.
You've got 39 hours of draft radio coverage you're going to be doing here this weekend. So I was like, I'll do a little bit more talking today. I'll shoulder some of the weight for John, because what we're doing is this. Check it out. Okay, so the Texans have 7 draft picks, right?
Yes.
They've got a second rounder at 40th overall, a third at 90th overall, 111th. That's that pick that's coming from Miami. That's in the 4th round. And then you got to go to 171 overall.
Right. That's
a 5th rounder. And then there's no 6th rounder because they traded that away. They got Keon Crossan, who balled out on special teams last year. And they've got 3 7ths, 240, 248, 250. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go back through history. And for this Texans team, the 2020 Texans team, we're going to add players from each pick that we think would fit best. So all the guys who've been picked 40th overall in NFL history, we can choose from, and we can add them to this roster. So if we want, and we're going to start there at 40th overall, if we want, we can go with a guy who you saw play, I think, in high school at Willow Ridge, right when you'd moved to town. Went on to a brilliant career, preceded Barry Sanders at Oklahoma State, and then he went to the NFL and was one of the best backs of the 90s. He's one of the best backs of all times. He was in the Buffalo offense. I'm talking about Thurman Thomas at running back. We could go with him.
Okay. You're saying he's an option.
He's an option, but I don't think he's the best option for this Texans team, because I think the Texans have some work at running back. But that's just a taste of what we might do here, John. Because
I'm curious now to see who else is at 40. If you're telling me that Thurman Thomas is an option, there are others. I'm waiting to hear.
Well, sit tight, because also from the Houston area. Now, he wasn't here in Houston long, but played a little bit in high school here, played in college here, and he wrecked shop in the NFL for about a decade and a half. I'm talking about, none other than Michael Strahan. Now, he started the most games of any 40th overall pick. He started 205 games.
Yeah.
93 to 2007. And, I mean, he has 142 sacks basically all time. It's pretty good. Now, other guys who we could consider at this position, I mean, that's who I'm going to go. I'm going with Strahan. But other guys we could consider are Tim Grunhard, really good center for the Chiefs for a decade.
Yeah, out of Notre Dame,
Yep. You got Thurman Thomas, a guy named Brad Van Pelt, who played from 73 to 86 for the Giants at linebacker. He was drafted by the Giants. And then really
Michigan State.
Yeah. And then the only other guy of consequence that I think you could consider is a defensive end named Al Baker. He played for the Lions. He was drafted by the Lions, played for the Cardinals, a few other teams, as well as corner Dexter McCleon. Good player. But I think, John, with what the Texans need, with what the Texans want, you got to go with one of the best pass rushers of all time in Michael Strahan, even though Thurman Thomas is there dangling and really enticing you.
I love the fact that both these guys have Houston ties.
Isn't that great?
In some way, shape, or form. So that's awesome. That's really, really cool. But you are dead on. Straight. I'm like, Thurman Thomas. Think about Thurman Thomas with Deshaun Watson. Just close your eyes and think about that for a second.
Scary.
And then close your eyes and think about J.J. Watt with Michael Strahan.
Even scarier.
both of them are really beautiful images. But you're right. I would go straight hand with David Johnson, Duke Johnson, and my gut tells me that somewhere along this draft pick row, we're going to find a running back. So let's go with Strahan at number 4. Wow, that's a really good one. That's excellent. Okay, good job, Drew. That's a good number for you.
But I like your foreshadowing because, yes, we will. I mean, at least I will. We will take it.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Okay, let's move along to 90. We got to wait a while on draft day, but here we don't wait long at all. The guy who played more times, more starts at the 90th overall pick than anybody else was a guy named Tootie Robbins. St. Louis Cardinals took him out of East Carolina. He was a tackle, played 147 games. Hey, that's good. I don't want to go there.
Okay.
Guy who played the second most amount of snaps or starts there was a really good left tackle for the Cowboys, late 70s, early 80s, Pat Donovan.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay. All right.
Going to be tough to pass on him, okay? But I've got another option for you. And no, it's not Matt Schaub, who was a 90th overall pick.
He was the 90th, yeah.
It's not Bill Bishop, who was a pretty darn good defensive tackle, played at North Texas. He was in the 50s. I just don't think we know enough about him and can really compare, but maybe he'd be a good fit as an interior pass rusher. But the guy who I think we got to look at and got to consider, and really ultimately I think it's going to give Pat Donovan his only run for his money, is Antonio Freeman, wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers, John. Now, the Texans are stacked there right now, but can you really pass up a guy who averaged 15.2 yards per catch in his career, who in his best season had 17 yards per catch, 1,400 yards, 14 touchdowns in 1998? I mean, I know there are lots of receivers on this team, John, but I got to go with that guy because some of the other options are Mike Flanagan, the center, something called a Dick Hoke out of 25 rushing touchdowns in his career. Yeah. I always get you with the something called a Dick Hoke, but 61 career touchdown catches, Antonio Freeman. Let's go receiver.
I would be more apt to go receiver, especially in this world of the NFL. I know this is going to sound weird than an offensive tackle, but I feel like, Pat Donovan was a tremendous player, but I feel like with Titus and with Laramie, and obviously, look, we understand the deal with Laramie, trying to get the extension done, and hopefully that will get done. And Laramie and Titus will be the two bookends for as long as hopefully, Deshaun is playing. Hopefully they're playing as long as he is. I feel really good about that. Now, it doesn't mean that this is the one thing I think in a draft, which gets to be really interesting, is sometimes you look at a position and you go, oh, well, you don't need that position. You don't need that position. This kind of answers my question about wide receiver. We've got 2 tackles. You're good. Don't draft them for the next 2-3 years. Well, that, I think, hurt the Texans when they didn't draft tackles. They drafted Derek Newton in 2011, right? 2011. And then after that,
yeah.
They didn't really draft offensive linemen because they had Dwayne Brown and then they had Derek Newton. And so really didn't draft offensive linemen, period. I think Ben Jones came in 12, with Brandon Brooks in 12. And then after that, there was not many guys that came in the offensive line, not many guys drafted in the offensive line. So I would pick Antonio Freeman kind of for the same reason that I would pick Pat Donovan. I have no problem with it because even though you have a strength, Titus Howard and Laramie Tunsil, doesn't mean that you can't draft a guy and say, okay, this guy is a tackle. Hey, maybe he can play guard. Maybe he's one of our 5 best linemen. We got to play him somewhere. And the same thing with Antonio Freeman, especially at receiver, because of all the different things that receivers are asked to do, play the X, play the Z, be the guy that plays in the slot, all the different things that are asked. You can take myriad guys and mix them and match them like this receiver bouillabaisse and spit something out that's really good. And I think Antonio Freeman would have been a guy that did that. So I could go either way and be happy with it, but I just feel like Antonio Freeman, better overall player. So I'm going in this draft, best available player, and I think that's got to be Antonio Freeman.
And kind of like you said a moment ago about running back, there's offensive linemen we can get a little bit later, I promise you. So think about that.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to
move on to 111.
111.
Fourth round. Well, 4th round in the current draft. This is one thing to think about is the guys you're talking about. A lot of these guys like that pick number 90, that's a third rounder now. Pick number 90 back in the day might have been a seventh or eighth rounder.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now this is another really good argument one.
Okay.
In 1960, the Detroit Lions took a left tackle named Grady Alderman. He played from 1960 to 1974, started 178 games, and he's the most accomplished player as far as starts from that draft.
Yep.
Played with Minnesota most of his career. He was a Pro Bowler 5 times and All-Pro once. Really tough. So he was basically starting all those games in the early 70s for those Minnesota teams that went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, you got that guy. But you also have Roosevelt Colvin, who was picked at 111 overall. And this is where it's tough because you've added Michael Strahan. You passed on Pat Donovan. Do you want to pass on a franchise left tackle twice? But you really want to get after the quarterback, you know? So I kind of like shaded and went with Colvin here, but I can be convinced to go with Grady Alderman. A few other names to consider, but I wouldn't consider them over these two. Jason Fabini, a tackle taken by the Jets in 98, played a decade. A center taken by Miami in 1985, Jeff Dellenbach. Another center, Ken Bowman, in the 60s. He had Buffalo defensive back Terrence McGee, played a long time for Buffalo. He had 17 career interceptions. He also had Mike Howell, Cleveland Browns, had 27 picks out of Grambling State in the late 70s. But Rosie Colvin, 52 and a half sacks, John. That's a lot of sacks that you could help your pass rush with. What do you think?
Well, you've added Strahan to Watt, Merciless, Jacob Martin. I mean, you really have bolstered that particular area. And in the pick 111 in the 4th round, if you get a perennial Pro Bowler at tackle, I think that's probably a good way to go. And like I said earlier, because you have a strength doesn't mean that you can't strengthen a strength. I mean, think last year, but the tight ends, you had Jordan Thomas, Jordan Akins coming off really good rookie years. You didn't really know what you had with Darren Fells yet, but then obviously you know what he gave you in 2019. And then you drafted Kyle Waring, one of the better athletes in the draft at tight end to throw to the group. To me, tight end was a strength, and you strengthen a strength. So I think that's what you're doing here. So let's go Haldeman right here, tackle with the Texans. I think you throw him into the mix. If he ended up being one of your top 5, great. If not, you put a Pro Bowler on a bench. How about that, Drew? And
I think that's going to force our hand at 248 a little bit later and switch to.
Okay.
So I think that's a good choice. I like it. So we're going. So far, we've added a Hall of Famer in Michael Strahan. We've added explosive receiver in Antonio Freeman. And we've added a guy who was 5 times a Pro Bowler in the late 60s at left tackle in Grady Alderman. Okay, on to 171. Interesting choices here. And I think it's pretty clear the way we should go. But there are some reasons that you could pause. Now, there's a guy named Mark Cotney. Played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was on the original Tampa Bay Buccaneers team, but he was taken by the Oilers way back in the day.
Yeah.
And you might be saying, who the hell is Mark Cotney? And I hadn't heard his name before, but then looked him up. Nobody at that pick, 171, and that was the 7th round back in 1975, started more games. He started 95 games. The next closest guy was a defensive back named Neil Craig, who was taken in 71 by the Bengals. Okay, I like Cotney because he had 17 picks. He was a strong safety, seemed like a solid player. You know, he played, about 9 years, and he was solid. Strong safety, started pretty much every game for those Buccaneers. But giving me pause is explosion. And you know how we like explosion, John?
Yep.
There's a guy named Lionel Manuel, Giants receiver, picked in 84 out of Pacific.
Yeah.
And he averaged 17 yards a catch. Didn't play long, played 84 to 90. But he was on a couple of Super Bowl teams for the Giants.
Yep.
And his best year came in 88. 1,029 yards, 4 touchdowns. I don't know. I mean, I could go with Manuel, but we've talked about safety needing help. Cotney seems like the logical choice there.
Boom. Lionel Manuel was a heck of a player. I think had we not gone with Antonio Freeman.
Yeah, then you got to think harder, but.
Right. And then obviously hindsight 2020, and that's all this is, hindsight 2020. But maybe if we didn't know Lionel Manuel was coming up, maybe we do it later. But Antonio Freeman was just too good to pass on. I think Cotty right here playing for the Bucks. And, look, playing for the Bucks back in the early days.
He was on the very first team, and they were horrible. But then he was on a team that went to the playoffs.
Oh, yeah.
3 years later.
Yeah, 3 years later. 3 years later. That was a group that for the Bucks in the 70s that kind of grew together. I mean, that was really when a time – put it this way. John McKay, when he took over, he was the head coach at USC, longtime coach at USC, great coach. When he took the job in Tampa Bay, it was an expansion job, and he said, I've got a 5-year plan. And everybody's like, whoa, you can turn this around in 5 years? And in year 4, 1979, with Doug Williams at quarterback and a hellified defense, Cody being part of that, Leroy Selman being a major part of that, Richard Wood at linebacker, they were really good on the defensive side of the ball, and Cody was a big part of that. So I would go that way. I think if he doesn't get on the field, start next to Justin Reed, he ends up being a guy you rely on special teams. I think that's a nice fit. I don't like giving up on Lionel Manuel, but if I can come up with some special teams help at worst at 171, and I'm coming up with a competent safety that I can play next to Justin Reed, I feel pretty good about the value. That's the way I'm going to Cody.
All right, we're moving on to 240. So far, we've taken Michael Strahan, Antonio Freeman, Grady Alderman, 5-time Pro Bowl left tackle from the 60s, and Mark Cotney, a safety. 240 now. Here we are. Kind of slim pickings and kind of an obvious choice there because this guy was taken in the 9th round by the Houston Oilers in 1991, never played a down for Houston. Went on to San Diego and wound up catching 29 career touchdown passes, and hit 7,000 receiving yards in a long career, almost 12-year career. Do we want to just definitely go back with receiver and Sean Jefferson? Because really the only other, I guess, guy that could give you an argument was taken in 1953. He was a linebacker. He was a linebacker for the Browns, but he's more famous for what he did as a head coach for the Steelers in the 70s. Was Chuck Noll.
Chuck Noll.
Somebody that's kind of a thinking man and want to add him, or do you just want to add talent and go with Sean Jefferson? I don't see how you could go with really anybody else at this pick.
Well, now this would be really cool. This would be really cool because you stick with Sean Jefferson. Noel ended up moving to guard. He ended up being, back in the day, before they had the comp system in the helmets, Paul Brown tried the comp system and he almost set his quarterback on fire. So he had to come up with a different way to get the plays in from the sidelines because at that point, most of the quarterbacks throughout the league were calling the plays, but in Cleveland, he wanted to call the plays. So he had a messenger guard, and Chuck Noll was one of his messenger guards. So I don't know that – I mean, even though guard would make some sense, he wasn't a tremendous NFL player. But Sean Jefferson was a very, very good player. Now, here's the irony of the situation. I don't think it's ever happened in the NFL where father could play with son. But Sean Jefferson's son, Van Jefferson, is in this 2020 NFL draft. And he will go, I think, well before the 7th round. And I think he's actually a guy the Texans might consider at receiver. I mean, I think with pick 111, maybe even pick number 90, he's a guy that I think the Texans would take a look at. He is a very accomplished, not surprisingly, because his dad, Sean Jefferson, is now the Jets receivers coach. And the Jets need a receiver. So we could take Sean Jefferson, then draft Van Jefferson, and we'd have father and son on the same team.
Now think about this. Sean Jefferson averaged 14.9 yards per catch per his career. That's good. Okay, yeah. In 98, he averaged 22.7 yards per catch. And my first thought was he must have had one of those 98-yarders, right, where he caught a touchdown. Yeah. It boosted the average because he only had 771 receiving yards on the year. He averaged almost 23 yards a catch that year. You know what his longest reception was? 61 yards.
Wow.
He had 34 catches.
He's a good player.
He had a lot of big, like, he moved the chains and then some.
Yeah.
So, hey, let's add him into the mix and let's see what happens, you know?
Yeah, no doubt. And getting him at this point, what are we, 240?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Add him
Done.
in, then maybe you flip him for something else, or you flip one of the other guys. You know, you got a lot of strength. Got a lot of strengths there. Okay, so Sean Jefferson's the choice. Now we are into the last two, the comp picks. 248. So we mentioned 248 a few minutes ago because we took Grady Alderman, an offensive tackle, left tackle, who was very, very accomplished. He's actually more accomplished than either of the guys you got starting right now, but I think we're going to roll with those two and have Alderman as your swing guy. So nobody started more games than 2002 San Francisco 49er pick Kyle Kozier, pretty good out of Arizona State. You also had a linebacker named John Bunting in the 70s, played for the Eagles, or he was drafted by the Eagles, played a lot. But I'm tempted by Kelvin Beachum because I went to SMU and I know about him. Pretty good.
Yeah.
But I think the correct choice right here, you got to go to the service academies because, hey, that's what you do, right? In 1999, Buffalo took a guy named Bryce Fisher, a defensive end out of Air Force. And Bryce Fisher didn't wind up playing until 2001. I'm guessing that's because he had to fulfill his service. But started a couple of games for Buffalo in 01. Then he was dealt to St. Louis, spent 3 seasons there. He was on the Super Bowl team for Seattle in 05. He had 9 sacks for Seattle. He had 26.5 sacks in his career. Let's maybe add a little juice out there on the edge. It's either Kelvin Beachum or Bryce Fisher in my mind. I mean, Beachum's nice, but I think we're okay, right?
Well, John Bunting ended up being a coach at the University of North Carolina, so at his alma mater. So you could go that way and then just add him right to the coaching staff if you want to do that. But, man, we got to put a Mustang on here. We don't have an opportunity to put a brown bear on here. So you know what? Let's bolster the offensive line. Let's go with Kelvin Beachum. Give us some depth on the offensive line. Nah, listen, we've added pass rush. We've put a focus on pass rush with Michael Strahan, and I would love a service academy. I, in fact, visited the service academy. It was down at Brown University or the Air Force Academy where I was going to go to college. But you know what? You did go to SMU.
Yeah.
And Kelvin Beachum did go to SMU. So let's put Kelvin Beachum on and make him our 248th select. Well, the 248th selection.
All right, we could talk about the Jello and Humphrey Lee Cafeteria. That'll be fun. Welcome to the team. Welcome to the Texans, Kelvin Beachum. Okay, this is an interesting one. It's our final pick. We haven't taken a running back, John. And sitting there at running back, you got Rashad Jennings. He was solid.
From Liberty, yeah. Wow.
I don't know if I want to go with that guy, though. I think you do better at running back if you go with a guy like Ahmad Bradshaw out of Marshall.
Yep.
12 touchdown catches, 36 touchdown runs. But you got a stud at linebacker. Literally, Scott Studwell. Vikings, 13 years. But you also – are you totally sure that you want to go with A.J. McCarron as your backup? Because sitting there at Harvard is Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Let's see.
So you want to add some linebacker depth, or do you want to add Ahmad Bradshaw as your running back there?
Man. We did not go Thurman Thomas.
Nope.
But still pains me a little bit. Ahmad Bradshaw, when he was healthy, was a hammer. I mean, he was fun. He was kind of like Zach Moss in this draft. Zach Moss is just kind of a hammer, like 5'9", 215, and just hammer you. I want Ahmad Bradshaw. Okay. I want Ahmad Bradshaw. I'm tempted by Scott Studwell. He was a really good linebacker.
Pro Bowler in '87.
For the Minnesota Vikings. The mid to late '80s Minnesota defenses, they weren't like the purple people eaters of the '60s and '70s. But you had Joey Browner in the back. You had Carl Lee. You were very, very good. John Randall came along near the end of all that. It was a really good – and Studwell was a very, very good piece of that defense. However, I'm going with Ahmad Bradshaw, who scored the game winner in 2011 against the New England Patriots, falling backwards into the end zone.
All right, so here's who we've drafted, John, in our fake draft for the Houston Texans here. We added a Hall of Famer, Michael Strahan. We have made our pass rush much better, okay? We added a great receiver in Antonio Freeman from the 90s. Then at 111th overall, we went and added some offensive line depth, and really a guy who he could probably come in and start. He could probably take Titus Howard's spot if need be. Doesn't need to, but he could if that came down to it. Mark Cotney is a safety who started about a decade in the league. Every game is a strong safety at 171. Took another receiver, Sean Jefferson, because that's really all that was there at 240. The added Kelvin Beachum because you wanted SMU help, not pass rush help. You simply wanted somebody for me to talk to about Jello from SMU and the Squirrels along Bishop Avenue. And then a tough pick at the end, 250. We thought about Scott Studwell, a good linebacker, but we went with a running back, Ahmad Bradshaw. That's a good draft. I like that draft.
That was really fun. It was really fun. It was sort of like opening Pandora's box. I had no idea what was coming. When you started with, we could draft Thurman Thomas.
Yeah.
But we're probably not going to. I'm like, wait, what? We're probably not going to?
But
okay. But yeah, it worked out pretty well. That was fun. That was really good in the lab, Drew.
All right. You need to save your pipes. I'm your good pal. I'm worried about you. I want you to be rested and well for the weekend because this is going to be a fun weekend. I can't wait to see what happens, see what the Texans do. And this has always been – it's been a fun one. I miss you, bro. I wish I could be next to you there in the studio and all that. But you take care. You stay safe.
Absolutely, brother.
And this has been In the Lab. See y'all later. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to know when we post new content.